And the story starts with a question. How do you establish a tradition in your family? How do you establish a tradition? And what is a tradition? Literally, the root of the word tradition is, in Latin, is to literally hand over. Dite is the fingers, to hand over. So when you establish a tradition, you're literally handing something on. For example, many people probably hang their Christmas stockings in a place that's very similar to they hung them on the door, you know, in their own home as a kid. You know, if they were on the doorway of their bedroom or over the mantle of the fireplace or wherever, that's a certain tradition. And who sits where during Thanksgiving dinner is a tradition. And this is a story that happens to be about establishing a tradition in the Doolittle family. In one of my lives, for many years, I've been a chaplain volunteer at Albany Medical Center. And the director of pastoral care there, Harlan Ratmeyer, is a good friend and a storyteller. And we were having coffee together before Thanksgiving, soon after Harlan had moved back to take the job at Albany Med. He had been our interim minister in Schenectady. And we're having coffee, so I said to him, I said, Harlan, how about coming to Thanksgiving dinner? He says, oh no, I think I'm gonna go to the Mathises' house. Now, the Mathises are members of our church who tragically had lost a college-age daughter to leukemia when we were benefiting by having Harlan be our intern. And Harlan left that interim role because we got a full-time minister and kept in touch with the Mathis family. And came back and actually did her memorial service. It was quite touching, quite sad. But I said, so you're going back to the Mathises for Thanksgiving? And he said, yeah, and I'll sit in Jossie's place. And I said, you're going to sit in Jossie's place? How do you know it's Jossie's place? He said, well, you know, Jan, the mom, she has a tablecloth, and for every holiday they have a tablecloth, and the people who sit at a certain place trace their hands on the tablecloth, and then she goes over it in needlepoint on her sewing machine, and she puts the date and the initials. So when I go to Thanksgiving dinner, I'm going to sit where Jossie sat from the time she was 4 until the Thanksgiving before she died, because her hands are there. Wow. Well, I was awed. And we talked a little bit more, and then we went our ways for the day. But when I got home that night, I said, you know, I got this great story. And I told my wife, that beloved Gay, that story. And she looks at me and she said, gee whiz, that's great. You know, we ought to make one for your mother. Well, my mother was 94 years old. And my mother's birthday is Christmas Day. So we've always been challenged to do the birthday and the Christmas thing, and you know, it's been a little tension. Now I gotta back up, because you know there's a certain tension between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. And I gotta say that in my experience with my wife and my mother, it could be a capital T at times. It could be that way. So I looked at her and I said, you really want to do this? She says, I think I really do. I think it would be really nice. And you know, people are coming here for Thanksgiving, so people could trace their hands and maybe do a little messagey thing. And I don't think I could needlepoint it, but I got a lot of calico left over from another project. I can get some more. And why don't we go out and buy a nice blue tablecloth as the background? That's her favorite color. So we did. Now, people did come to our house for Thanksgiving, and my mother was there, but in the kitchen and in the dining room, but I was secreting people into my office where they would trace their, and, well, I was in awe that Gay was doing this. It was quite something. And some of the messages were kind of neat coming in, like, you're wonderful. You're the best grandmother. Wow. Well done. Our family is crazy. That came from one of our Valley Girl great-granddaughters in California. But they were really neat. About 2 weeks before Christmas, as Gay is getting the layout kind of settled, she says to me, she says, "You know, Joe, it would be nice if we had your mother's hands in here." I said, "My mother's hands? How am I going to get a trace of my mother's hands without blowing the..." She says to me, she says, "That's not my problem." Yep. So I go over to my mother's apartment in her assisted living facility, and I explain to her that I need to have traces of her hands because my Sunday school class, which I didn't really have, but I told her I had, needed some old hands, and their hands were all little hands. So could I trace her hands? Which I thought was a pretty good way of doing it. And I brought them home. Now, one of our traditions as adults is that we kind of pass where Christmas is, like we pass where, and it was my older brother Larry's turn to host Christmas. And we went over to his house in Castleton, and we opened some presents, and then we had our dinner, and then we played Pictionary, and then it came time for the birthday part of the day. It's about 3:30 in the afternoon. And we get called to the cake. And we walk into the dining room, and there's nothing there but a blue tablecloth. Now, my mom's eyes weren't that good. And she looks around, "Where's the cake?" And then she sees the tablecloth. And my brother, the lawyer, begins to jump up and down like a 12-year-old and saying, Ma, look at the table, look at the table. It's our hands, Mom. It's all our hands. Happy birthday. And she came over and she began to look at these hands. Right here is the tablecloth. And they're all there. And she looks at them, and she looks over at my wife, and she says, "You did this for me, didn't you?" And Kay says, "Yes, I did, Mom. It's beautiful. Oh, I love you so much. And I love you, Mom." Now, at the time, 37 years of marriage, that's the only time I can ever recall hearing my mother and my wife say that they loved each other. And the tension went away, and the wonder went away, and the story has grown in the family as we've had new people added through marriage and birth. We've got little handprints on there.
Yes.
And it's been a wonderful tradition. And I've told this story. I've told this story many times because I really love to tell it. And I know of 6 other applications of hands on tablecloths for 50th wedding anniversaries, for significant birthdays, for other things. And the other carry forward from this is if you look at the middle of the tablecloth, in between those gnarled hands that are my mom's, is the phrase, "Blessed be the tie that binds." And as a kid visiting my grandparents on the farm in Northfield, Massachusetts, we go to the big old church. And at the end of the service, they would sing as a benediction, "Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love, the fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above." And so we carry a tradition in our hearts and in our hands for the love of families. And I share that with you in hopes that it's caused some thoughts to stir in your mind and your heart, and maybe down the road with your hands.